Anas El Gomati is the director of SADC Institute, which is Libya's first political and security think tank. He joins us now via Skype from Tunis. Thanks so much for joining us. Is this an agreement that the majority of Libya's factions and parties can work with, or will it largely be seen as one imposed on it by foreign powers?
Well, obviously there is a large degree of spoilers in Libya, and I think many of the names that were supposed to be involved in the last end of this process have unfortunately boycotted, and some of them came out, in fact, and have launched a rival Libya dialogue that is really just a mechanism to apply pressure and relieve pressure from those that believe that this agreement doesn't kind of support their needs at this moment in time. And let's be quite clear, many of the needs in Libya today for many of the war makers is more war. And for many of the entire 6 million population of Libya, it's a desperately needed peace. So at the moment, is this an agreement that many of the factions can work with? The factions that agreed amongst themselves, yes, but let's be clear, there are some political factions that have said no. There are many militia leaders that don't understand perhaps the degree to which they will end up playing a role in the future government. And third and first and most importantly, the roots of this conflict really haven't been addressed. And the roots of this are simple, that there has been a political and military fight, competition and race for authority over the last year and a half. Will those two sides that have been racing, that have just signed this piece of paper, will they agree to work together tomorrow? Or could they take the war from the battlefields and the deserts and the cities of Libya into the ministries, the institutions and the bureaus and desks of government? Now that's a big risk that could happen, and this could turn sour in a week. And so I think this is one of the reasons why we have to remain sober about the chances and prospects for a sustainable peace.
Okay, but I mean, what else happens at this point then? Can Libyans at least try to start to rebuild their economy and try to at least start instituting a government infrastructure that's unified?
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to find a way to forgive myself for being so cynical about this, but I don't see a reason to celebrate. There are 280,000 people that have been made and displaced from Benghazi in the east of the country. In the west of the country, there are many people that have been arbitrarily detained, killed, and if not, are missing from their families. There is up to 1 million people that are outside the country now that are in refugee camps or in temporary displacement. Now, there's not really much for them to try and talk about in terms of looking forward, but in terms of the economy, this is the most desperate the most desperate project that the country needs right now, because unfortunately we had 320 billion or 360 billion in cash assets reserves and liquid reserves by the end of 2011. But in 2014, we're now looking at a deficit. 2015, we could be looking at a deficit in 2016 and looking at debts. So in that respect, the urgency for this agreement was last year, not today. But there is much work to be done ahead. I'll reserve my cynical remarks, and I'll reserve any kind of joy for the moment that Libya really transitions to that works fully well.
Well, I'm not sure you'll be any more optimistic about my last question then. What about Daesh, which is growing in Libya and retains control over various areas?
Yeah, Daesh, and I think the main concern that I've had with ISIS, and that most Libyans have had with ISIS, is that one can use this label of ISIS and label that against their political opponents. Now that has been what has dogged the country and rammed the country into civil war over the last year and a half. The real Daesh has been able to grow and find a place in the country in the cracks and the gaps that the state apparatus, the security apparatus, the intelligence community has not been able to work with, allocate resources to, because it's been too busy fighting an unnecessary war. Now, I have to make the same comment that I just made earlier on. Unless they make a firm commitment, both sides, that they will have a principled agreement with each other, that they won't discuss, describe, and approach each other in hostile terms, they can begin to work on a political agreement that is sustainable, durable, and they can begin to allocate resources towards fighting ISIS. But ISIS is not a national project. It's not a national project that will make the country better. It's a security project. The project that the political factions have to work with one another is, how do they get this country to being, the country that 6 million people dreamed of in 2011 that is now a nightmare in 2015. So I think that's the sobering remarks and the remarks that we need to hear. But the project that we have to have is something that unifies us, that allows us to live in prosperity, but without having to conflict and argue over who gets the bigger piece of the pie. Libya is a country of 6 million people with a massive, one of the largest oil reserves in Africa. We could be living all together in harmony. So unfortunately, I'll remain kind of cautiously optimistic at best, but probably cynical the next time.
Anas El Gomati, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us from Tunis.